What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss the fallout from iOS 17.0.3 and the whole overheating issue. We're going to talk about even more iOS 17.1 features and changes. We're going to talk about how Apple might potentially be dropping new products this month. iPhone 16 rumors are already starting, a crazy AirTag story, and much more. And of course, if you want to stay updated with all things Apple, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Okay, so let's start by talking about iOS 17.0.3, which was just released this week for all devices, and this was to fix the overheating issue. Like, you could not go on social media for the past 2 weeks without hearing about iPhone 15 is going to blow up, iPhone 15 gets too hot, and that was all solved now with the software update. I've not heard a peep about it since the software update, so that confirms that the issue was not something within the iPhone 15 hardware. It impacted all devices, so this was an iOS 17 bug that has now been resolved with iOS 17.0.3, and I will say that after installing 17.0.3, my devices all got significantly cooler. Like, I did not even have overheating issues. Like I told you guys, I'd never had any type of overheating issue personally on any of my iPhone 15s, and I have every one. I have 3 Pros right here, or Pro Maxes, along with regular 15s. Never had any type of overheating. And I tried to push them to their limits to get them super hot, but I never had overheating issues. But with that being said, with 17.0.3, I noticed that all of my devices were cooler than they normally were. So that's when I started to realize that the term overheating is kind of subjective. It kind of just depends on what you feel in your hands. And to me, I never felt any type of heat, but I will say after updating to 17.0.3, I not only noticed that the heat output was less, it was not getting as hot, but also my performance was better as well. You can see here, I ran a Geekbench test and my score is actually higher than what I got on previous versions of iOS 17, which really impressed me, because you heard a lot of people speculate that the only way Apple was going to be able to, resolve this overheating issue is by throttling the CPU or throttling the GPU, but that's not true. The scores are actually higher than they were previously for me. And I tested this on my Pro Max, my Pro, and my regular 15s. Same score, same increase in scores across the board. So yeah, iOS 17.0.3 is great. It is a must update if you're not on the 17.1 betas. Now, speaking of the iOS 17.1 betas, let's talk about some additional new features and changes in the software. We are currently on beta 2, and we should be seeing beta 3 next week. So first off, let's head into the Messages application. And now when you press and hold on the plus icon right here, you actually get some haptic feedback. So before, it would just kind of happen, the animation would happen and would show your photos, but now you get haptic feedback. And also when you select a photo now, you will notice that it shows photos and albums along with a search tab. So we now have additional options when we select a photo, and an easier way to kind of go into other albums or search for other photos. Okay, so now I want to talk about the music application, because I made a mistake in my beta 2 video where I said when you go into playlists and then filter this by favorited, this must not be working. The favorites filter must not be working because it says that nothing is appearing here. Well, I'm dumb. I didn't realize that you have to favorite a playlist for it to show up there. So I didn't realize that the filter actually shows up in every section, not just playlists. Like if I go into artists, albums, songs, anything, let's go into songs, for example, and you can see it's filtered by favorites. So you can filter every section of your music now by those favorites, including favorite artists. You can see all your favorited artists right there. So the filtering system goes all throughout. It's not just in the playlists. So I'm going to go ahead and favorite this playlist, and now we're going to filter by favorited, and there we go. We have our favorited playlist right there. Now, something else that's really awesome in iOS 17.1 is that when you're on a playlist like this and you tap on the 3 dots and go to edit, you will see that we have different kind of AI generated album artwork that you can choose from. So if you don't want it to be just a mixture of all these different album covers, you can choose one of these AI generated ones, or you can tap on the existing one and you can choose a photo from your photo library. So I just took a photo of the skeleton. I'm going to choose that as the artwork for this playlist. And now you can see that my tunes playlist has a skeleton as the cover art. So it's cool that you can customize that now in 17.1. Now, a big change in iOS 17.1 is when you go to create a new wallpaper here and you go to photo shuffle. Right down here, you will notice that we have a new option, which is something I requested over a year ago, and that is album. We can now choose a custom album that we want Photo Shuffle to shuffle photos from. So instead of having to pick manually all the photos you wanted to choose from, you can now choose an album. So favorites, for example, is chosen right here, but I can choose any of these albums right here from my library that the lock screen and home screen will shuffle through to change wallpapers on a hourly, on lock, on tap, daily. Whenever we have our shuffle frequency set to, it will shuffle between those photos, which is awesome. That is a must-needed feature that I've been waiting on for a long time. And I talked about this in my beta 2 video, but if you go into settings and into standby and then into display, this is a new section here. We can now turn our display off automatically after 20 seconds or never. And at first I had this set to never because I didn't want my always on display to turn off, but I actually found that automatically works better for me. And it doesn't actually turn your display off at all unless you're just not near your phone or you're asleep. And I didn't really think it would work, but it works well. So I have mine set to automatically. I would recommend you, if you just instantly went to never, kind of reconsider and try out automatically and just see if you like it better. Also in the Books application, the bottom left tab is now Read Now, whereas before it was Reading Now, a minor change. Oh, and something else in iOS 17.1 beta 2 is that if you go into the battery section and then to battery health and charging, and then into charging optimization, if you're on an iPhone 15 series and you had this set to 80% limit, that was actually not working. Actually, as of iOS 17.0.3, that doesn't work. Your phone will still charge to 100%. But in iOS 17.1 beta 2, it's fixed. So now if you have this set to 80% limit, your iPhone 15 will actually follow that rule and will only charge it to 80%. And then also another small change in 17.1 beta 2 is that it now includes support for the Nintendo Switch N64 controller. Now I cannot talk about iOS 17.1 beta 2 without mentioning watchOS 10.1 beta 2. And that's because this update adds the double tap gesture, the double tap feature to the Apple Watch Series 9 and the Ultra 2. That was of course pretty much the only difference in the Series 9 and Ultra 2 from last year's models, and it wasn't even available at launch, and it's just now in beta with beta 2. However, I will say that it's pretty awesome. It's definitely better than the accessibility feature that we had previously. So if you go into the Watch application on your iPhone, you will see that we have a new section here called Gestures, and from here you can turn double tap on or off, and then you also have options for playback and also for Smart Stack, where you can choose what you want to do with a double tap. And then going back, we do also have cover to mute right there under Gestures, which that is not new. Now I did also run a fresh Geekbench test on 17.1 beta 2. I'm starting to really not like to do them like right after I install because it's not super accurate. I'm still going to do it, but I just found that, doing the Geekbench test later on down the road, like a couple of days later, tends to be better and a more accurate test as to the actual performance, reading from the Geekbench test. So you can see the updated score here, pretty strong. I don't really have anything to compare it to besides beta 1, so we'll kind of keep this in the log and see how it compares to future versions. Now, as far as battery life goes, I am running the beta on my main device, my 15 Pro Max here, and I've noticed that battery life is a little bit worse than 17.0.3 because I've been going on and off with using the Pro right here on 17.0.3 and my 15 Pro Max, which is on the 17.1 betas, and the Pro Max still gets better battery life, but it's not as big of a difference as it probably could be. So I'm thinking that battery life is slightly worse than 17.0.3, but it's really not a big difference. And it's kind of hard for me to say because I've been using the betas pretty much ever since I got that phone. So, give it some time. I'll let you guys know more, details as for battery life, probably by the final version. Like I'll really only know by the time the final comes out because it's still kind of too early to tell if battery life is much better or worse than 17.0.3. Okay, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple because we should be seeing iOS 17.1 beta 3 next week. Apple's been on a roll. I mean, we've got 17.0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 2 betas of 17.1. Apple has been on a roll lately, so I would expect that to continue into next week, and we should see 17.1 beta 3, most likely right there on October 10th. And then after that, we should see beta 4, and then potentially an RC, and potentially a final release for 17.1 on October 30th, the day before Halloween. But of course, things could change. We could even see it as early as the 23rd. But my guess right now, if I had to make a prediction, is going to be on the 30th. And for those asking about a 17.0.4, I doubt that's going to happen. I mean, we could see a 17.0.4 get pushed out to the public without beta testing if Apple finds some type of big bug or some type of major security vulnerability, but I don't really see that happening. I mean, we're just a few weeks away from 17.1, so I would imagine that unless it's an emergency, we're just going to go from 17.0.3 to 17.1. Okay, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news, and let's start by talking about some potential Apple products that could be coming as soon as this month in October. So according to a source at Mac Rumors, Apple will likely begin accepting new models for trade-in this month. And they say similar changes in June coincided with the Worldwide Developers Conference when Apple began accepting trade-ins of the Mac Studio, 13-inch M2 MacBook Air, and 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro for credit towards the new Apple product purchases. And of course, at that Worldwide Developers Conference, Apple launched the 15-inch MacBook Air, the new Mac Studio, and the new Mac Pro. So they're saying that it seems plausible that a similar expansion of the Macs Apple's going to accept for trade-in this month might correlate with the launch of at least one new machine around mid-October. So that sounds promising, but we've already seen new MacBooks. We already saw a new Mac Studio. We already saw a new Mac Pro. What could we possibly see in October? Well, how about a new iMac? It seems that the only plausible product that Apple could launch with the M3 chip this early is the 24-inch iMac. And get this, 2023 is also the 25th anniversary of the iMac. It's a perfect storm. It makes perfect sense. And if we do get the M3 iMac, it would be the first refresh to the iMac since 2021, since early 2021, because we did skip M2 for that iMac. So this would be a pretty big upgrade, presumably for those who have the M1 iMac or for those that were holding off until there was a more powerful iMac. So that's exciting, but Apple doesn't usually just release one product. They don't usually just drop one product randomly via press release and then they're out until the next year. That doesn't normally happen. So we're also hearing that new iPads could also be coming as early as this month. And this time it's according to 9to5Mac, who says that Apple is working on 2 new versions of the iPad Air 6th generation along with the iPad Mini 7. 9to5Mac says that their sources revealed that Apple still has plans to introduce the iPad Mini 7 soon, although the exact timing is still unclear. When it comes to the iPad Air, Apple may have more ambitious plans for its mid-range tablet. That's because sources told us that the company has been experimenting with 2 new versions of the iPad Air, codenamed J507 and 508. And of course, nobody mentioned it, but we could also see a new iPad, just the regular base model iPad as well. So pretty much any of those options are up for grabs, are possible for launch later this month. And that's pretty exciting. So iPhone 15 is old news, right? Let's move on to the iPhone 16 and some new rumors that we just got for this, because these are actually pretty interesting, and we're hearing that the 16 Pro may get larger displays than the iPhone 15 Pros. And this comes from Mac Rumors, who obtained preliminary information on the weights and the dimensions that are planned for the 16 models. And if you take a look at the differences here, it looks like the 16 Pro is going to have a 6.3 inch display compared to the 6.1 inch, and of course that's going to make it taller and wider and also weigh a bit more. And then for the 16 Pro Max, we could be looking at a 6.9 inch display. That's insane. And you can see there, that is also taller and wider. But what's interesting here is that you can see the weight is only 4 grams more. So despite being taller, wider, and having a bigger display, the weight of the 16 Pro Max could only be 4 grams heavier, which is pretty impressive. Now, of course, this is super early. Like, these could completely change in the matter of months, but it's cool to just see some preliminary info on the iPhone 16 Pro series. And then finally, just as tradition, let's talk about another crazy AirTag story. Okay, so this one is interesting because a guy on Reddit posted this thread right here where he shows a iPhone attached to a drone, and the reason for that is because he's flying the drone with the iPhone on it to track down a lost cat who has an AirTag attached to it. So the cat got loose. This is out in the middle of the country, and this cat's running through a field completely lost, but he has an AirTag attached to him. So instead of the guy running out there and trying to find the cat in all that field, miles of field, he actually attaches his iPhone to the drone to try to get it to relay information to the AirTag, because as you know, an AirTag relies on other iPhones in order to ping back, the location. And when you're out in the middle of the country, there's going to be no iPhones nearby, so you're not going to be able to get any type of location info from that AirTag. But if you fly an iPhone near that AirTag, then the AirTag will get a location and it'll ping back to you, and you'll be able to find the lost object, in this case, a cat. Now, what's interesting here is that the day that he did this, he said that it didn't work and he's going to try another mission tomorrow. And then he gave an update here saying that he got a ping this morning, which is the next day. And then he went out for a walk, found her in the soybean field, and it actually connected at about 60 feet away. He said, "I've had good luck with tags pinging in lost mode so far. I get a with you update, and then I flick to find and hunt it down with wideband." But yes, she's going to get a real GPS tracker soon, the cat, of course. So the fact that he found his cat using this method is amazing. I love this story. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That is the latest Apple news, along with the latest on iOS 17.0.3 and iOS 17.1. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, as always, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe for more iPhone 15 and iOS 17 coverage. And if you want to check out all of my premium wallpaper collections, along with a cool way to support me via memberships, you can head over to brandonbutch.com for all the info that will be linked down in the description below. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.